last year, a viral video went around of Agriculture and Fisheries Minister Floyd Green toasting with champagne at a birthday party during a lockdown day. And when that video went viral, he was forced to resign. I'm going to quote now from his resignation letter, which he released to the press on the 15th of September last year. No matter how briefly and regardless of the circumstances, I should never have participated in any engagement that could indicate a lack of appreciation of the difficult and serious realities that now face the entire country. My actions have demonstrated a lack of sensitivity for the difficult realities that all of us are facing currently. It was wrong. I accept that this was an error of judgment and that it sends the wrong signal, especially in light of the government's drive to reduce the spread of COVID-19. For this, I am really and truly very sorry. End of quote. And so, Agriculture Minister Floyd Green resigned as minister, but not from the parliament, and he issued a public apology. Good for him. He admitted he was wrong. And he certainly behaved better than British Prime Minister Alexander Boris Johnson, who has admitted that he and his staff flouted UK pandemic regulations that they themselves imposed on the country, and they violated their own regulations by having bring your own booze office parties, birthday celebrations, and wine time Fridays. Boris did apologize. He said, "I want to say sorry. I understand the anger that people feel. We must look at ourselves in the mirror and we must learn." So he did apologize, but he has refused to resign as British Prime Minister. Now, Boris Johnson's Partygate, as they are calling it, is not yet over, as the London Metropolitan Police are still investigating whether charges will be laid against him. But the Floyd Green affair here in Jamaica seems to have been laid to rest, as Jamaica's Director of Public Prosecutions, the DPP, has ruled that, and I quote, "no criminal charges ought to be preferred against Mr. Floyd Green, and also against the others who attended his birthday party," or not, it wasn't his party, it was the party of his assistant. The basis for the DPP's conclusion is the legal provision that no movement days do not apply to members of parliament and municipal councillors. The same politicians that crafted the laws and regulations to manage the COVID-19 pandemic, they exempted themselves and their fellows from having to obey those regulations. What is interesting is that in the mother of all parliaments at Westminster in London, they did not grant any such exemptions to themselves, to British politicians. What has angered the British public is that while the law, the British law, required everyone, including public servants and Her Majesty the Queen, to obey the pandemic regulations, certain politicians put themselves above the law by repeatedly and frivolously ignoring them in London. And so the British public is incensed. I wonder how the British public would have reacted if their parliament had exempted their politicians from having to obey the pandemic restrictions as our parliament in Jamaica did. The Jamaican public doesn't seem to mind that the Jamaican politicians make themselves out to be exceptions. Initially, when the exemptions were promulgated in Jamaica, public officers were only exempt while engaged in their duties as a holder of these public offices. Such a requirement sounds reasonable. If an MP or a councillor has to go about his business as an MP or a councillor, then they should be allowed to do so despite the pandemic regulations. Subsequently, however, this proviso was removed, allowing free movement for public officials not only while conducting their government business, but also while conducting their private business, or even no business at all. Simply, the regulations do not apply to them. Unlike their counterparts in the United Kingdom, Jamaican politicians can legally attend bring your own booze office parties, birthday celebrations, and wine time Fridays. Why do Jamaican politicians believe that they can use the law which they have the power to enact, use those laws to elevate themselves above, and I quote here again from Floyd Green, to elevate themselves above the difficult and serious realities that now face the entire country? This seems to me to be an abuse of power and privilege. But then, the Jamaican public have allowed their politicians to make themselves into a privileged class, with declarations of assets made in secret and blithes galore for corruption. And so, even though Floyd Green admits that what he did was wrong, his colleagues in Parliament have made sure that what he did was not illegal. According to the DPP's judgment, there were 19 persons present at the birthday party in the hotel. 2 were elected politicians, so they are exempt. But what about the other 17? Were they innocent by association? The exemption did not apply to them. How is it that the DPP says that they should not be charged? Well, the 17 would be in breach of the pandemic regulations if it can be shown that they left their place of abode on a no-movement day. According to the DPP, and here I quote from her judgment, which is publicly available, where such persons are shown to be present at a hotel facility, taken at its highest, demonstrates that they may have been guests at the facility at the material time. It does not assist us in respect of when he or she commenced being guests at the facility or when they left the facility. The provisions which govern the restriction of movement on particular dates could not have prevented persons checking into a hotel or resort facility prior to the particular date and remaining as guests through the actual no-movement date. End of quote. So, it's not enough to prove that these 17 persons were at a party. What you have to prove is that they left their yard to go to the party and then they went back home after. Because if their claim is that they stayed at the hotel from the day before and left the day after, then they did not breach the no movement day. So the simple way of proving that they went to the party and then went back home would be to consult the register of overnight guests at the hotel. But this evidence was not presented to the DPP for her ruling. According to the DPP, as such, and I quote here, it is the considered view that the evidence is insufficient to ground the criminal charges for breaching the no movement provisions. End of quote. So, if the police do not give the DPP the evidence to prove that these people were that they left their yard to go to the party and go back home, then they cannot be charged with breaching the no movement day. In other words, and these are my words now, the case file is incomplete. How often have we heard that a file submitted to the DPP was determined to be incomplete and was sent back for further information? And legal means exist to compel the hotel to provide these registry information. And if the hotel declined to voluntarily provide the information, then a subpoena can be issued. So the question is, why did the DPP not subpoena the registration records? Why did she simply say, well, we don't have the registration records for the hotel, so therefore there's no evidence that they were not guests, so we let everybody off with not even a warning? Is some negligence involved here? Or is this just another example of political corruption? Is our legal system simply impotent to prosecute politicians and their associates? Would I be forgiven if I wondered whether the Crown prosecutors really wanted a conviction in this case? Did they really want to prosecute anybody? In the meantime, the British public are still calling for the Prime Minister to resign, and the London Metropolitan Police are still investigating. Here in Jamaica, Floyd Green was reappointed to the cabinet even before the DPP's ruling was publicly known. Brothers and sisters, the supine Jamaican public deserves what it gets. If you lie down and do nothing, you deserve what you get. God bless you.